I'm Dr. Martin Khechara. I'm Associate Professor for Engagement in STEM at the University of Wolverhampton, and I'm a member of the award-winning STEM response team. And in this first part of our maths catch-up session, I just want to give you a bit of an introduction about what we're going to be looking at over the next week, but also give you a bit of an introduction to what numbers are and how to manage fractions. So this is what we're going to be looking at over the course of the next week and over the course of the next videos that are coming out within this subject area. We're going to have a bit of an introduction, which I'm giving you now, and numbers and fractions, as I said. We're going to be looking at basic algebra. We're going to look at advanced algebra, look at quadratic equations, consider trigonometry, look at statistics and probability, and then look at all the different kinds of graphs that you might use. So let's move on then and just start looking at the content for today. And but first, if you want to know more about the STEM response team, know more about what we do, find all of the resources that we're making as parts of these catch-up sessions, then please just look on our social media, or you can look at our web address there at the University of Wolverhampton to find all the amazing resources that we've been building. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to give you an introduction to numbers and fractions. But first of all, we need to start thinking about some different ways of naming numbers, if you like. And you may have used this term before, hopefully you have. But if we hear the word an integer, we need to know that they are just simply whole numbers that include 0. And they are denoted by a peculiar kind of Z-shaped symbol, a letter-like symbol which looks like a Z. And they can be positive or negative, but they're always whole numbers. Now, numbers can also be rational or irrational numbers, and that really depends on their sequence. So rational numbers can always be written as a proper fraction. And a collection of rational numbers, again, are denoted by a letter-like symbol that looks like a Q. Now, terminating decimals and reoccurring decimals are rational numbers. So a terminating decimal is without the continuously repeating sorts of sequence of numbers that you might see if you try and divide 1 by 3. If you do that, we get 0.3 ever recurring. So we get 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 forever. But that's still a rational number. Now, irrational numbers can't be written as a fraction, and what they have are non-repeating decimals. The numbers are always different. All right, they never end. And a really good example of that is pi, because that keeps going and going and going and going. So this diagram here just really sort of summarises what I've just said, and you can see the difference between integers, rational numbers, the whole numbers, and the irrational numbers there. So all rational and irrational numbers are real numbers. But because this is maths, we could also have imaginary numbers, and they are produced from taking a square root of a negative number. But because they can't exist, they don't really exist, but they might sometimes be used. But they're called imaginary numbers. Okay, so let's move on to fractions. And first of all, we need to think about multiplying fractions. And there's some very simple rules to help you along that I'm going to remind you about. First of all, let's look at this very simple diagram of some nice plates of pizza you can see there. And just to show you the different parts of a fraction, let's remember the top number is called a numerator, and that is how many equal parts we have. Then we have the denominator, which is the bottom number of that fraction, and that's how many equal parts the whole is divided into. So there are some simple rules, as I said. What we need to do when we're multiplying fractions, we need to multiply the numerators and the denominators separately. If we've got mixed numbers, and a mixed number is like 1 2/3 or something like that, we need to actually make them into improper fractions first. That's really important. And actually what you can do is you can cancel down those numbers before you start, perhaps, or at the end, to try and make the numbers smaller so you can deal with them easier. So let's look at an example then. So I want to multiply this. So I've got 1 and 1/4, 1 and 1/4, multiplied by 1 1/2, 1/2. So first of all, I need to know a few things. So I've got denominators of the fractions, not the whole numbers, haven't I? So on the left-hand side, I've got a denominator of 4. On the right-hand side, I've got a denominator of 2. And we've got some whole numbers. This is why they're called mixed numbers, because we've got a mixture of whole numbers and fractions. So it's important I remember what those denominators are. Right, so what we need to do is we need to turn these into improper fractions. And an improper fraction is when the number at the top is bigger than the one underneath. And of course that can't exist, can it? So as a proper fraction. So that's why it's called an improper fraction. And so we need to turn this into improper fractions, as I said, and this is what it looks like. So we know we've got a denominator on one side, on the left-hand side of 4, so we put that at the bottom. On the right-hand side, we've got 2, so we put that underneath as well. And then all we've got to do, we know we've got a whole number of 1, so we just multiply that by the denominator. And we put that on the top in brackets. And then we just add it to the numerator. So as you can see on the right-hand side, I've done the same. And actually, I know we've got a denominator of 2. So I need to multiply that by the whole number, which of course was 1. And I put that on the top in brackets again, just like I've done on the left-hand side. And then I can just add that to the numerator, which is easy. So then what that happens is I can do that math, and then I can get my improper fractions. And you can see I end up with 5 over 4 multiplied by 3 over 2. And then all I've got to do then is just carry out that sum, multiplying the numerators individually and then multiplying the denominators individually. So that gives me an answer in an improper fraction of 15 over 8. So again, that's an improper fraction. So what I can do is I can actually convert this back to a proper fraction, if you like, and which could be a mix of mixed numbers. And so all I've got to do is do a little bit of division, and you've just got to consider how many things are there. So we need to think how many 8s are in 15. All right, and actually we can't have 2 because that would be 16. So there's 1. Right, so I've got one whole one. So I've got one whole number. So that's 1 and something. All right. So we know we've got 8, which is the thing. So it's 1, 8, and then that's over so many 8s, if you like. So how many have we got left? Right. So we've got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So the answer actually is in a proper fraction. It's 1 over 7 over 8. And that's our answer, again, as in mixed numbers, as a proper fraction. So when we divide fractions, this again is quite easy. All we've got to do is simply turn the second fraction upside down, multiply it, and then we get the answer. All we need to do is make sure that if we've got any mixed numbers, we need to make them improper fractions first, if we need to. And again, you can cancel down to make those sums a little bit easier. So when we are adding or subtracting fractions, firstly we need to make the denominators the same. So what we need to do is find the lowest common multiple for each of those denominators. Once we've done that, we might have had to multiply those denominators up. And we need to remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we need to do to the top. All right? By the amount that you've multiplied that number by, we need to multiply the top number by 2. Again, if we've got mixed numbers, we can make them into improper fractions first. And once we've got the common denominator, we can add or subtract the numerators. And that makes everything nice and easy. So just a few things to remember here. Integers, it sounds like a complicated word, but they're just whole numbers. There are rational, irrational, and of course imaginary numbers. And when multiplying, dividing, or subtracting, or adding fractions, you've got to always change those mixed numbers into improper fractions first. So I hope that just gave you a bit of a reminder about the whole numbers and fractions systems of multiplying and dividing, things like that, that you might have forgotten about over the summer holidays. And hopefully it'll help you when you get into your BTEC or your A-level studies.